Well, good afternoon, everyone. From Manchester, well, let's say from the north for the moment. Welcome to the Carbon Literacy Project. Thanks very much for joining us as we launch this support scheme to further the spread of carbon literacy through the UK's colleges. With support from the Association of Colleges. We'll tell you a bit more about what we're going to do, but first I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sarah, who'll run through some housekeeping and the agenda. Over to you, Sarah.
Hello everyone, so my name's Sarah Davis and I am the Education Coordinator here at the Carbon Literacy Project and work with my colleague Anna, who you'll also meet later on the call. So thanks very much for coming to our webinar today. As Phil said, I'm just going to quickly go through the agenda of what we will be covering today. So we're going to start today by looking at the context of further education. And we're going to be looking at that from a student's perspective, in terms of careers, and also from a government perspective, and also some of the challenges that the sector faces. We'll then delve a little bit deeper into what the Carbon Literacy Project is, and of course, how carbon literacy training works, the materials that we have available for further education. And then we'll go on to talk about the Carbon Literacy for Colleges support scheme before going on to hear insights from our guest speaker today, which is from the AOC, which is Steve Frampton from the AOC. I'd just like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So as you'll already know, this webinar is being recorded. And as this is a webinar, your microphones are muted and your cameras are switched off. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So please don't be shy. Please use the question and answer function so that we can answer any questions that you have along the way. The way this is going to work is that our presentation is going to last for roughly 1 hour. And the last 30 minutes are reserved for questions and answers, so that the session will actually finish at, well, no later than 5:30. I think I'm going to hand back to Phil now, who perhaps is going to do a quick introduction to our guest speaker.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks very much, Sarah. So yes, I should have said I'm Phil Corbell, the co-founder and director of advocacy for the project. So we've seen this whole thing grow for the last 10 years. And someone who's really been a voice of wisdom alongside us way beyond the job description, it has to be said, is Steve Frampton. Steve, who works for the Association of Colleges on their climate stuff. Steve, welcome. Oh, it should be said, Steve today is playing the part of the Invisible Man. We're not quite sure why, Steve, but say hello.
Hi, Phil, and hi, everybody. And I'm sorry people can't see my hat, and I'm sure many people have tuned in just to see that, if nothing else.
They would, Steve. It's such a shame. But Steve, we'll come to you towards the end. But I mean, just by way of a taster, where do you think climate is registering on the minds, particularly of college leaders at the moment? Or is it being squeezed aside by the other pressing issues about keeping the place heated and the like?
Well, it certainly is there, and you're right to contextualize it by saying there are many other issues on their desks at the moment. I mean, quite rightly and understandably, change of status, finances, recruitment, assessment, staffing, COVID, illnesses, etc. are all there. But what I would say is, from my interaction with about the 130 boards that I've been working with in the sector so far, there isn't one where I've gone in and worked with principals and boards where by the end of it, they don't say, this is really important. It's important because it's important to our students. It's important to our staff and our communities. And we will pledge to take action on it, and we will sign up and use the roadmap. And many of them want to be carbon literate and use the CLP as well. So I think we are pushing on an open door, Phil, and great credit to them, the leaders, the boards, the governors, staff, student governors, for really insisting that we are.
Fantastic. Steve, much more on that topic, and maybe we get to see you by the time we come back to talk to you towards the end of this session. We'll be hearing, as I say, from my colleagues, Anna and Sarah as well. And just to reiterate before I pass back to Sarah, do use the Q&A function to throw us questions, although we will have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So yeah, Sarah, back to you to set the scene.
Thanks very much, Phil. So I'd like to begin by just thinking about why carbon literacy training in education. So the UK Department for Education announced the creation of sustainability leads across the sector, all of whom are going to be trained in carbon literacy. And these staff will lead the creation of climate plans and will be able to use a shared carbon literacy training kit to train their colleagues in how best to contribute to these new climate plans. There'll be sustainability leads in every nursery, every primary school, secondary school, college, sixth form, and university in the country. Phil, our Director of Advocacy, is on the working group helping to shape this strategy. But it's important to note that at the moment, this is strategy and sadly not policy yet. And whilst this illustrates that the government is taking climate change education seriously by wanting to embed carbon literacy into educational institutions, it's also looking at helping all educational providers across the entire sector. And today we're going to concentrate on further education, so colleges and sixth forms. And I'm going to explain why over the next couple of slides. So back in October 2021, the government announced a net zero strategy, which aims to support up to 480,000 highly skilled green jobs by 2030. So a couple of questions for you to ponder on. Who is going to fill these roles? And also, what comes to mind when you think about the term green jobs? Is it simply people who are building wind turbines, or can it be a bit more general? Is it more for us to stand a chance of hitting net zero targets, that it's any job in any sector, in any industry needs to have green skills and green knowledge embedded within it? We often say, we have a phrase that says, every job is a green job. And that's kind of where we're working here. And in terms of the green skills, what do we mean by that? We're saying that green skills are the knowledge, abilities, values, and attitudes needed to live in, develop, and support a sustainable and resource efficient society. So essentially, green skills are the competencies that workers need to deliver the goals of green jobs. And how does this relate to education? Well, in essence, it means that no matter what discipline is being studied, young people need to have a baseline knowledge of both the climate crisis and the solutions that can work to mitigate against it in order to adapt, in order to contribute to these jobs with these net zero policies. Not only that, the Green Alliance noted back in January 2022, so this time last year, that there's actually a huge skills gap within various industries and sectors to help them reach this net zero goal. The sectors with the most pressing emissions reductions that need to be reached by 2030 also face the most immediate skills shortages. And these sectors include housing, they include transport and land use. So young people going out into the world of work, no matter which sector they're going into, will be under increasing pressure to fill these skills gaps. And they need the knowledge and the skills to be able to do just that. And not only do the governments want to scale up climate change learning, and not only do industrial sectors need to have this, not only do industrial sectors want to have skilled graduates and skilled people within their workforce to help them reach these net zero goals, students want it too. Since 2010, around 80% of students have told the SOS UK that they want their institutions to be doing more on sustainability. And 60% of them want to learn all about it. So just to go back to what Steve said at the beginning, it's something that's really, really important to students. And not only do students want to develop their knowledge and skills in this area, They also really want to work for an organisation with strong green credentials and perhaps even go on to work within the green sector. So there was research carried out by a social mobility charity, Speakers for Schools, and it saw 1,200 state school students aged between 15 and 18 canvassed for their knowledge and appetite about pursuing a green job. And what you can see here is that 85% of the respondents stated that they care about an organisation's carbon footprint, and over a third plan to research an organisation's green credentials before applying for a job. So there's plenty of reasons why climate change learning is really, really important in the further education sector. However, we know that it aligns to government policy. We know that it aligns to industry needs, and we know that it aligns to student ambitions. But we're also very aware from conversations that we've had that there are certain challenges. Funding is a huge issue within this sector. And after the autumn budget, we realised that there were no extra funds that were allocated to further education institutes like colleges and sixth forms. Not only that, but experience and talking to different educational practitioners, we know that there's huge demands on academic staff, on academic support staff, which means that there's less capacity to develop climate change learning in order to embed this into the curriculum. Speaking from some experience, climate change education can sometimes be seen as an add-on, like an extracurricular activity, or something that just science and geography departments can pick up, and it's only really necessary for science and geography students. However, as we've seen, green knowledge and skills is needed in every discipline, so that students can go on, whether that's into further training, whether that's into further education or higher education, I should say, or into their jobs, so that they can apply this knowledge into these different sectors. So today, that's why we're offering our contribution to help support this sector with our Carbon Literacy for Colleges support scheme. And you'll hear more about that a bit later. But right now, I'm going to hand you back over to Phil, and he's going to talk to you a bit more about the Carbon Literacy Project and how carbon literacy training works. So over to you, Phil.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Really good bit of scene setting there. And before we go to my bit, I think this whole issue about what's a green job is central to where this lands in FE. We call carbon literacy because we believe it's a core competence across the workplace. We think that the time has long passed that this is a niche, and that whether or not climate is in a job description for a student entering the workplace or going into HE, this enhances their chances, enhances their range of competencies, and it's accessible. It's very, very much where we're coming from. So with an apology for people that know about us, I'm just going to go through the basics of the Carbon Literacy Project for about 10 minutes now. So bear with me while we get that all going. And we start with a definition. This derived from a working group of educators and employers and campaigners. And we thought, you know, what does it take to actually make this meaningful and distinctive and impactful? So if you look at that definition, and awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organizational basis. As educators, you'll recognize this as a path to some quite impactful learning, because it's not just here's the science, here's climate. It's about application and relevance. And that happens within the day's worth of carbon literacy training. So I'm going to trot through this at speed. So if I miss stuff out or if it's not making sense, bring it up in the Q&A ASAP. But anyhow, we're just clocked up our 10 years and we're truly international now. We're a bit giddy about the fact that this month there will be carbon literacy training in the Antarctic, which will actually be our 7th continent. And we, as Cooler Projects, our social enterprise, we work on behalf of the Carbon Literacy Trust. That's us in numbers as in the end of the year. Last year, you'll see how close we are to clocking up our 50,000th learner. Again, a lot to unpick there, but it gives you an idea of the scale and breadth of what we've achieved as a small charity, but with this humongous community of practice that's really, really collaborative. And that other fact at the bottom is an estimate on the amount of energy that should be saved in the average workplace as well. I'm happy to unwrap that for you too. You'll also be familiar with course frameworks. I'd like to think that our framework, the Carbon Literacy Standard, is one of the simplest you'll come across. It covers those 4 headings, and I'm just going to trot through those just so you can get a flavor. Every carbon literacy course, if you were designing it from the start, which is not the case in this case, but it all contains this content as well as the stuff that makes it relevant to your learners. So good, let's just see, there we go. So under the knowledge, that we've got the science, the impacts, the regulatory framework, what's a COP when it's at home, right the way down to the college's policies, your area's policies if they have a climate emergency declaration, etc. Footprinting, starting in the home, but taking it into the workplace and to the campus. And then really significantly, what stuff actually counts. We are not in the zone of just unplugging mobile phone chargers or swapping out plastic bags. We're talking about what is the most significant thing you can do. That's a really core concept in carbon literacy. Values, yep, we absolutely have to have these values in play. Making sure that people feel empowered and making sure that the solutions that we propose are fair. This is also where we tackle climate justice and the idea that those most vulnerable to the climate crisis are those least responsible for it. Everything comes around action here. Everyone has to end their day's worth of learning and doing with an individual action and a group action, and that should take place in the most significant place that you can, which will often be the campus or the workplace. There's more to discuss there. And also we insist on social learning, collaborative inquiry, and maximizing the amount of the day's worth that is actually delivered by peers. Here's a thing, we're a training organization that doesn't train. We enable other people to use our methodologies and resources. And again, what we're talking about here is mainly the use of toolkits, which we'll come to in a minute. But what we do is accredit courses or shareable resources and learners and organizations as well. So that's how we work. We felt at the beginning, we all have a passion for training. We love delivering training, but we knew we could never get to scale if we were doing training. So our job is to be an enabler for you to use the framework, the methodologies, the wisdom of the many collaborators and existing practitioners to make this thing really, really work. And a toolkit, I referred to toolkits before. The usual practice, if you came to us as an individual organization, would be that we would mentor you, we'd support you to design your own course, you'd retain the intellectual property, run it for your own people. But now we're using shareable toolkits, which have, well, we're producing these shareable toolkits, very, very relevant to what we're doing with the sector. So it's sector specific, but not organization specific. But it's still adaptable. It's effectively a pre-accredited course with pre-formatted blanks in it, where you can still put your locally relevant materials, your college relevant materials, or even to some extent subject relevant material can go to the adaptable part of that. And it's a kit that really lowers the bar for who can train. We don't insist on certifying trainers other than they being carbon literate themselves. And the kits have a very comprehensive trainer manual. One of our early pioneers in local government said the manual was like having your hand held at every moment, which is, you sort of want that, don't you? And exactly that, anyone can pretty much deliver the training through the use of these toolkits. So that is a gallop through what we do and what we mean by a toolkit. And I think we are possibly at this stage, yes, going to have to sneak forward to make sure that we're going to the right part of the program. And I'm going to stop sharing now and hand over to my colleague, Anna, who can tell us more about what we're actually offering to the sector. Anna.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So, yep, I'm just going to discuss a bit more about carbon literacy and further education. I'll just share my screen. Oops. Is that, sorry, was that shared properly?
We're still seeing the.
Here we go.
There
That's
you go.
correct.
Yep, you're there.
Sorted. So just to give a little history, sorry, not history. So firstly, why carbon literacy in the further education? So firstly, it prepares students for university, further training and jobs. So it really provides them with those that sustainability mindset and those green skills and knowledge that is required from those different situations. Carbon literacy can also be embedded across different disciplines. So it's not just science courses or geography courses where it can often feel that is most fitting for this sort of training to take place. It's very much suitable for different subjects, and it's actually really important that it is embedded in different subjects, as we know, ensuring everybody, as many people as possible who are aware of the climate issues and can make as many changes as possible. So by embedding carbon literacy, this can lead to institutional change. So by generating a more sustainable mindset within colleges and different organisations, this can really influence policy and different actions that are taken. As Sarah was saying, students really want these green skills and develop this green knowledge as well. And not only that, but this is something that employers are looking for, so something that is really beneficial for students to gain, for them to take forward into the workplace. And also, unfortunately, often it might be a case that further education is the only opportunity that people will get to receive such climate change education, which is why it's really imperative that it's included as best it can. So in terms of the course itself, as Phil said, carbon literacy training is a day's worth of learning. So this is so that we can incorporate absolutely everything that needs to be delivered within carbon literacy training. And it's split into 5 different modules, which I'll go into detail a bit more in the next few slides. And the format can be delivered either online or in person in face-to-face learning environment. And whilst the training is a day's worth, it's quite customizable in terms of how you can split up the different sessions so that you can deliver it over a longer period of time. So over 5 weeks per se, so it's not one massive day of the same kind of training in that. Though we recommend sort of within a certain time frame period. So I think it's 3 months maximum from kind of start to finish, just so that all the training and the learning is fresh in people's minds before they go on to make the pledges, which is what they're assessed on. So just a bit of background about the carbon literacy course for further education. So it was developed by Manchester Metropolitan, so it's based on their university toolkit that was funded by BEIS and GMCA, and it was adapted with the AOC to further specify it to be more college specific and further education specific as well. So within the toolkit, what you'll receive is a training guide. So this has all the information about how to deliver your session, the different timing structures, and how you might want to adapt certain activities to different group sizes as well. You're provided with the slide deck, as well as a script almost to go through in terms of the details that you need to include alongside the information that's presented on the slides, an activity pack as well. So this includes all the resources that you need to deliver all the activities that are included within the training. We also have our Getting Started pack. So this gives you all the information that you need in terms of navigating the different materials and in setting up with a carbon literacy project in terms of the process of delivering training and providing us with the evidence for receiving certification, as well as the evidence forms themselves as well. So in terms of the 5 modules, so this is split as the first module being the science of climate change. So this goes into detail about greenhouse gases and kind of their impacts on the environment, and explains the greenhouse gas effect. But it's in a very accessible format, so it's not incredibly technical in its scientific terms, so it can be suitable for a wide range of audiences. But you can obviously alter it a bit more. Say if you are delivering to a science-based course, you might want to go into more detail about the science than you would for an art-based session, perhaps. And then in module 2, it's exploring carbon footprints. So this is looking at a range of different footprints, so consumption-based, production-based, and exploring how different actions that you can take result in different levels of emissions in terms of your carbon footprint. So number 3 is a zero carbon world. And this is looking at what we need to achieve to get to this ideal scenario of a zero carbon world, and sort of the gaps that are present there at the moment and how we can bridge those gaps. Module 4 looks at our wider influence. So this is looking at how we can communicate what we've been learning within carbon literacy training to other people, and how we might influence them to take more sustainable actions as well. And finally, module 5 is taking action. So this is all about forming an individual action and a group action, and how we can take steps within our personal life and use this wider influence that we have to really reduce our carbon footprint, and perhaps the carbon footprint of those around us as well. So what's included within the materials? So the learning is very interactive, as Phil said. It's not this kind of didactic approach of a teacher lecturing to a group of students within a classroom. It's very much group learning with lots of group activities and peer discussions. So really learning from one another and collectively coming towards different conclusions as well. However, the assessment is individual. So the pledges that students would put forward would be their own personal pledges. Although obviously in terms of group pledges, this can be something that they can have the same within a group. But it's just the issue of kind of copy and pasting the answers is where we would have issue with the assessment in that regard. So we often get asked how the materials can be adapted. So whilst the course is very much ready to go, carbon literacy is designed to be as relevant as possible for the audience. So it's just making minimal changes to really specify the training to your organisation and the locality of it. So including different facts and figures about local data. So perhaps the certain net zero carbon targets that your area might have as they differ across the UK, and sort of different actions that your organisation is already taking as kind of positive sustainability and carbon reducing steps as well. You might also want to tweak it slightly in terms of subject specificity. So as I was saying before, in terms of explaining the greenhouse gases and the greenhouse gas effect, you might want to go into slightly more detail about that within a science-based subject that you're perhaps delivering carbon literacy training within, rather than kind of art-based subjects where you might want to have more relevant aspects further on in the training as well. What isn't allowed, however, is entire activity changes. So as Phil was going through before, the carbon literacy standard is something which we need to make sure that training is meeting. So if you want to make significant changes to any activities, then we just need to check through that the training is still meeting the requirements of a course to be notified as carbon literate. So just get in touch with us if that's something that you'd be interested in doing. So more about the support scheme. So as Sarah was saying before, we really want to try and do our bit to help support colleges and further education institutions in delivering more climate focused education. So the support scheme we're offering is for students only, as we really want to try and push for more students to be carbon literate. And as we were saying before, it's something that really benefits them as well. It's something that they want to see and what employers want to see in their employees too. So it's a 25% discount from the usual £10 certification application fee for educational institutions. And the support scheme is only available throughout January. However, there's no expiry date on the certification applications, so there's no rush in terms of kind of purchasing the certificates and immediately delivering training. You can purchase the certificates now and deliver training in June or July or August or such. However, there's only 20,000 certificates available at this discounted price, and we have a minimum purchase of 100 certificates and a maximum of 500 by an institution. So in terms of what we recommend for delivery, it's first accessing the toolkit and setting up a pilot. So testing to see how best it might work delivering carbon literacy within a certain subject or as an extracurricular, and kind of how many people you might think would be best within this session as well. And you don't need to be certified as carbon literate to deliver, but it is recommended. And we can point you towards different training providers where you can attend carbon literacy training as well. So you can either have internal trainers, this would be staff or students. We really recommend trying to get students helping with the rollout of carbon literacy training, as it can really help improve that capacity for delivering training, but also provide students with additional skills that they can then take on further into employment as well. There's also the option of external trainers. So AUC and SOS UK specialise in education-based carbon literacy training. And if that's something that you're interested in, if you get in touch with us, we can help you to set up connections with these different providers as well. We also offer delivering successful carbon literacy workshops as well, where we offer kind of tips and advice on how you can best deliver your carbon literacy training. So in terms of the next steps, it would be getting in touch with us to access the toolkit material, if you haven't done so already, and also getting in touch with us in regards to the discount, and we can help set that up for you as well. We also have more information on our website about kind of resources and just generally more information about carbon literacy within the education sector too. And you can sign up to our newsletter where we post information about different events that we run and different events related to sustainability and education. And also it's where we make announcements about any toolkit updates that occur as well. So that's just our contact details there. I think my colleague Sarah will be posting them in the chat for you to access as well. But I'll just pass over to Phil now, who will be talking to Steve, I believe.
Indeed. Thanks, Anna. Thanks very much indeed for that. And the other thing that Anna is actually a living example of how becoming a student trainer, Anna's been was trained as a carbon literacy trainer at Manchester Metropolitan University, and we can vouch for the employability factor in that we've actually employed her. So if you want to talk about the student experience and the value of that in becoming a carbon literacy trainer, we'd be happy to take questions on that front as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions, thoughts and comments, and you're welcome to put those into the Q&A bar at the moment, but we will be coming to you as attendees after this conversation with the Invisible Man. Steve Frampton, who I hope some of you will know, is someone who, well, actually, Steve, tell us about what you do and how you've come to be doing what you're doing here. The fact that you actually come to your current work with a heck of a lot of experience and standing within the sector.
Thanks, Phil. And thanks for all the amazing content this afternoon, really interesting. So my background is I was a college principal on the South Coast in Portsmouth. I was elected by my peers to be the AOC president for 2 years, and then was asked by the AOC and the HE sector to be the HE Climate Commissioner, FEHE Climate Commissioner. The first time we've had a joint FEHE Climate Commission, or any commission, for 109 years. So that work was primarily initially to listen to the sector, find out what it needed and deliver. And we found, I think, 2 or 3 things, and one of them links directly to today. But the other thing was that they needed a direction of travel, a roadmap, if you like, Phil, to help them with their journey. So we worked with 30 colleges, and those colleges were college leaders, they were principals, they were chairs, they were interested staff, like on the chat today. They were also student governors. And from that, we managed to produce the roadmap, which has now been adapted and adopted by 200 of the FE colleges in our country. And it's given them, like I say, a direction of travel. It's not an A to B, it's almost just snakes and ladders. And you move forward at various levels, and you do what you can when you can. And one of the interesting steps along that roadmap that I was responsible for was, of course, to get an element of curriculum that was accessible to chairs of governors, principals, staff, students, and students right the way down to level 2. And that's the reason I was so keen to work with you in lockdown to adapt the incredible product that was available and make it slightly more specific to FE. And my real role over the last 2 years is to be going into colleges, often virtually during lockdown and now physically. I'm paid for by the AOC a day a week. I choose to volunteer for another 4 days a week to try and help, because it's an agenda that I'm passionate about. And it's really to help college boards, college senior leadership teams. It's also to help sustainability groups in colleges. It's to help student groups in colleges move the agenda forward. And what I have found is, without any doubt at all, one of the most useful tools is the CLP.
Thanks, Steve. Now, why useful? You in describing that path to here, you're acknowledging the importance of this, and we'll come to its usefulness. But before we zoom in on carbon literacy, let's just pull that back a bit to the rationale for climate education within the curriculum. Going back to this proposition that I put in, that this is a core competence. Indeed, from an employer's perspective, repeatedly, employers say to us, this is like where we were with health and safety, with safeguarding, with diversity and inclusion. So the idea is being taken up by employers as a core competence across the board. Do you think that's being reflected in the curriculum design and delivery in FE?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I also work with all the major exam boards, trying to get them to review every single qual at every single level to ensure this is embedded, because it's important to our students. We know from those amazing surveys that were undertaken by SOS in our own country, Zurich in Europe and Czech in the United States, 2.4 million young people surveyed, 7 to 17, and 64% of them said this is the most important issue. We also know that at least 20 to 30% of those young people are suffering from eco-anxiety. So it's important, and it's that important. And you're right to put it alongside all the other things you do and say it is a core competency for employers. We know that. I think.
And it's also something which we get anecdotal feedback from students going into employment interviews, that it's a fantastic talking point. That an interviewer, we hear often in interviews going, well, what's this carbon literacy thing? Whilst it's distinctive and the ability, there is a specific learning outcome within the carbon literacy standard about the motivation and ability to communicate the issues. So in terms of enhancing employability as well, we're into the zone of co-benefits here, and I'm presuming, if you're watching this, folks, that obviously you have an active interest in the subject, and it's way more than doing your bit for climate, however important it is. That the co-benefits around employability and well-being for pupils, for the capacity of the college to influence and bring benefits into its area as well. All of these things are being done, and we're in a position at the Carbon Literacy Project to disseminate some of that good practice too. In our work with DFE, in this working group that was referred to before around their climate and sustainability strategy, there's some very good thinking going on. And the key word you'll be glad to hear around this, Steve, is whole system approaches. That whilst carbon literacy is our day's worth certified badge, the approach from DFE, and frankly from anyone that's sensible, is this has to go across the whole institution, curriculum and footprint and community as well. Does that chime with you, Steve?
Yeah, I often talk to boards about the need for 3 C's really. One, this is a collaborative agenda nobody can do on their own. Secondly, it's a co-constructed agenda. We need to be doing it with partners and particularly our students. This isn't an agenda we do to our students or for them, it's one we do with them. And in the very best institutions, students who've done CLP are driving their boards and their institutions and holding them accountable. And the third thing for me has got to be cultural in the sense that it needs to run through the entire institution holistically and outwards into the educational ecosystems that colleges are part of, i.e. their communities, and that includes employers. Because as you say, Phil, it's really valued by employers. We've seen young people go out for jobs with it on there. It's a bit like, well, what did you do in your gap year? What's this CLP? It's a question that's invited. And then actually we've seen young people, after talking about this to employers have actually contacted you to say, we need training because we all need to be more carbon literate. And I think, I could quote a famous chair of governors at a college in Brighton who said, I can't see how I can be an effective chair without being carbon literate. I know principals who've done it alongside their students.
Yeah.
I know many staff have done it with their students. And I think when you get those sorts of partnerships developed, those 3 C's, it's really, really effective.
2 things that you brought up there. One is Sussex. And the other is the co-benefits. But let's we were meant to have a guest actually from the Sussex group, but they've sort of rather led the charge here. Could you just give us a brief description of what happened in with the Sussex group?
Yeah, I think a little bit of a history context. Obviously, during lockdown, I worked with you to rewrite this to make it slightly more appropriate for FE, and it was a great pleasure to do it using my chief examining experience. But we really needed a willing volunteer. I'm not saying a guinea pig, and we were, we had too many. So what we did, we focused on one, and we focused on the city of Brighton, because not only did the chair of governors and the principal there want to do it, they wanted to do it with the other colleges. And I think this is really important. So BASVIC wanted to do it with Varndene, Brighton Met, and the Agricultural College in the area. And they committed to doing this as part of a broader strategy, which was to move through the roadmap and get to the top level together, helping and supporting each other to do it, which led to all of Sussex doing the same. So I think what was interesting is, and they also did the CLP, one did it taught, one did it online, and they did various approaches to see what worked best with their students, level 3 and level 2 students. So they were very much key, I think, to what we were trying to do as the CLP and the AOC, which is to make sure we had a product that was fit for purpose. And not only that, was really relevant to young people, and they enjoyed. And as a chief examiner, I'll report back to say the thing they enjoyed most was the assessment, because it's not conventional. And the fact that it's about applicability and relevance and what will you do and what can you do more broadly with your community, I think adds real value to it. And they did really enjoy it. So hats off to them for being, I think, the pioneers and the first of hundreds of colleges that are interested in using it, but not necessarily doing the assessment yet.
So that's where we want to get to, and we'll come to, can see a couple of questions in already. We'll come to that in a minute. But final question then, Steve. how do you move from the foundation that is the carbon literacy course that builds the core competence and starts things? How do you sustain it, and what's the role of staff training in that?
Well, absolutely critical, and hence the workshop today, and hence my gratitude to those people who've come on and joined today, and all those other people who've taken that leap of faith over the last 18 months in order to step forward and put their head above the parapet. I mean, I think it's absolutely vital. And I think we do need advocates and ambassadors in all of our institutions if we're going to drive it forward. Like I say, I know half the sector are engaged with it. I think it's absolutely vital, but I think it's not just staff. It's also in institutions where you've got really committed students, which you've got trained, where they've become the advocates, the ambassadors, the driving forces. In fact, some of them have actually become trainers themselves and have been training staff in their institutions. And I think that sends a powerful message out to everybody. Be dubious there are real experts on this agenda everywhere, and accept the fact that we're all learning, and when we learn together, that can be very powerful.
That's fantastic. And I think there's a closing message we get from education institutions is that you start with confidence. You might not know quite where you're going in terms of how climate education and carbon literacy is going to land in the institution, but start it, because the momentum it builds, the energy it brings with it is extraordinary. So not being afraid to start small, because it does set something off in a very, very positive way. So I think what we're going to do now is open up for questions, and we've had a couple of questions. This is where things get a little less straightforward, but we've got a couple of really good questions here. Alina has asked, is this available in other countries? If yes, what are conditions? Thank you. Alina, the materials are, but in principle, but not, sadly not for free. Our funding was from the UK government, and it's restricted to the UK at the moment, and the discount is also restricted to the UK, I'm afraid. But we would love to support the use of those materials in other countries. We are working across 6 continents at the moment, and we're making our first forays into non-English language carbon literacy as well, which is quite successful. And some of that has been in education. As you'll sense, a lot of what we do is connect people to existing practice as well. Whatever we can do, Alina, on that front to help you along on that, that'd be fine. And colleagues, if you want to, yeah, I'm being coached here by my colleagues. So at the moment, the toolkit materials are free to use outside of the UK, which is fantastic. I think the certification is the certification discount that won't apply here. Steve is saying that for AOC members, he is available to support them in going forward on this too, and we can forward that email of his, depending where it went to. Yeah, we'll forward that to you should you wish to have that. So Thomas Bradley. Oh no, Sarah's just done that on. If you look. Yeah, it might come up on your chat there. Thomas, a really core question. How do you engage the students who aren't as interested or feel perhaps disempowered? We have the confidence that this is highly effective when you get someone in the room, but it's almost and we get this in workplaces as well. The pre-communication of its relevance is essential. Carbon literacy, to some extent, is the second thing after you've fired up interest. So that firing up of interest is absolutely essential, and we can give tips and again, good practice on how you get people in the room on this. If you have students in construction, sustainable construction is mainstream now. and using this as the rationale for why a construction student is being asked to look at external wall insulation or et cetera, and it's going into mainstream competencies there. But yeah, if you can make the case for relevance, I do have a standing joke I have about banning polar bears from this. You know, that it's, if we can get past that stereotype of this being another wildlife documentary disaster, and relating it directly to the lived experience of your students, that's really, really important. And someone who can help me answering that question, I think, is why you're standing by there, Anna, yeah, is about your experience in actually training.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the main drivers for students is the employability. So kind of looking past college and university and looking at what will really gain them those skills to take forward into the workplace. So as Phil was saying, making it really relevant to their subject, but also highlighting that this is a qualification that they'll gain essentially. So it's a certification that they can show to employers and say, look, I'm carbon literate, I have these skills and this knowledge that, as we've shown before, is something that employers are really looking for. So really showing that it will benefit students by engaging in carbon literacy training. It will benefit them after college as well. And I would say for students who are feeling disempowered about, because obviously climate change is quite doom and gloom a lot of the time, but carbon literacy really highlights the actions that you can take to have a really positive influence. And it's very collaborative, as we were saying, in terms of the sessions. And it really shows that you're part of something wider and makes you feel a lot more empowered to take action, and shows you the actions that you can take that will make a difference. So really providing students with that knowledge of what they can do to make a difference with climate change as well.
Thanks, Anna. And particularly if the college is wrapping this with the permission to do stuff as well, you know, this is the beginning of a process, and it's explicitly empowering. Steve, you wanted to come in on this issue of motivating students to participate.
Yeah, I couldn't be more in agreement with what you both said, but to reinforce it, I think perhaps from the point of view of having worked in 130 colleges now and different faculties within those colleges, I can honestly say I haven't come across one where it's been an issue. I think it does need framing very carefully. It does need to be relevant, but these are genuinely citizens who are interested in understanding what's going to happen going forward. And with my other hat on, because I'm the patron of Off the Record, a mental health charity for young people, we've been using it really as well, because we know that power comes from knowledge, and CLP is the most accessible form of that. And that leads to activity often as well, which also massively helps with the mental health issues around this agenda. So I've worked with engineers, construction, fashion, hair and beauty, A-level French, geography, biology, chemistry. I'm literally, and if you look at the wonderful work that Charlotte Bonner has done at ETF, there are multiple curriculum guides to support this work that highlights its relevance in virtually every area of the curriculum. And that's why it's often delivered not as within one subject, but often across the tutorial program in GFE colleges and sixth form colleges, because it's applicable to all young people. So I think if you frame it right, and I've gone in and done introductory conferences for staff and students, really as a framing exercise. And then, you know, normally staff and students can't wait to get on and do the CLP course.
And I think the context is everything. Obviously, climate pops up in school here and there, but very much as you've done your chemistry bit, you've done your geography bit, and it's another lesson, some pupils might think. And so if we can bring home the relevance and other benefits around this before, fantastic. And then it happens in the room as well. So it really does land well. I'm just going to have to mute for a second before I cough all over you. 1 second. I don't always get to the mute button in time. But yes, relevance is everything. The fact that it's active it means, and particularly that magic ingredient, if you can involve students in the delivery, this really brings it alive in a very, very positive way. Sarah, thanks for this question. Is there a resource to access the tips and good practice you referred to boost engagement? I might be contradicted here. I don't think there is, but I'm going to use the word yet, because I think that would be such a useful resource for you, wouldn't it? So without tying my colleagues to a deadline, I think that'd be a really good thing to put together. Anna, thank you for nodding at that point. And I think Steve's is typing an answer too. Steve, do you want to come in rather than type?
Yeah, great. I mean, if my colleagues are members of the AOC and AOC colleges, I've put my contact email in there, and I'm more than happy to be contacted. This is what I do. I go and work. I've worked in 130, 140 already. I'm very happy to help colleagues with those initial steps, really, and signpost other colleges that are doing this well, and try and connect them up, really, as well. Because going back to my point about the 3 C's from the beginning, Phil, I do feel this is really a collaborative agenda. DFE's view would be we've got more colleges collaborating on this agenda than universities and schools. And the more we can foster that approach, the better.
Great. Achilles, thank you. That's a really good, straightforward question. We talk about a day's worth of learning, pretty much 8 hours, but either Sarah or Anna can answer this with far greater confidence than I can. Which of you would like to pick up that question about the hours of attendance and the 5 modules?
I can take this one. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think currently the modules are slightly vary in length, which is something that MMU is looking into in terms of structuring a bit more so that it is each module kind of fits more of the same sort of time frame. So I think it's 6 hours in terms of the actual engaging teaching, and then there's the film, which is the climate change, the facts, is
the David Attenborough documentary from BBC.
So that's it depends on how you want to run the session. So you might want to have that within the college setting of everybody collectively watching it, or have it set as like a pre-course work there as well. And there's elements that kind of can be adapted for more self-study, I suppose. So it's very much dependent on how you feel best to structure it as well, which I know isn't a very straightforward answer, so I'm sorry.
but Achilles, can't stress enough, Anna and Sarah and the rest of us standing, you know, we can flesh this out. You know, I hope this is the beginning of the conversation, and we try to make it as adaptable as possible, because you know, people have different places where we can slot this, but that mixture of face-to-face, in inverted commas, however you wish to deliver that, and self-driven, talk to us about enabling that to land the best way with your institution. John, if we can't afford 100 registrations to start with, yes is simple answer to that. Yes, please. We had to put a sort of a minimum number in, just mainly for our administrative capacity. So yep, you definitely can. I hope that's good. And I'm getting nods from my colleagues on that, making sure I'm correct there. Folks, anything else that we can help with at the moment? And I mean, another thing that occurs to me in things that we can help with, if we have a local employer who's already doing carbon literacy, I bet they'd be happy to at least come and talk to you about it. And if they have a trainer, they might help. We haven't really talked about the Carbon Literate Organization badge and the forthcoming Carbon Literate Educator badge. These are institution-facing brands that you can get as you scale up your delivery of carbon literacy. But part of that is about working with others. So if you have a local employer, then who's already on that pathway, and just one would hope they're decent people. They'd love to help a local college. So again, wherever we can connect you to existing good practice in the public and the private sector, we will endeavor to do that. You know, we exist to enable this for you and make it as good a thing as possible for you. And I hope that this is the beginning of a longer conversation with us or with Steve. If you haven't had that proper conversation with Steve, I'm sure you've got the sense now that there's a wealth of knowledge way beyond carbon literacy, but about the climate agenda in FE. What he doesn't know is not worth knowing. Sorry, it's a good thing you can't see him blush at this point. But yes, any other questions before we wrap up? I think we've done okay on the Q&A. I'm just checking on the chat there. You can see the note there that we'll be sending out some follow-up documents too on that. So yeah, speaking for myself, I'll certainly have missed out some important stuff in the effort to stick to time. So there's no such thing as a daft question in the aftermath of this. And if it's useful for us to revisit some of this content with colleagues, again, we're able to do that with you as well. So I hope that will suffice for the moment. I'm just keeping the Q&A window open just in case, but it looks like we've satisfied your curiosity for the moment. My role as Director of Advocacy in this is about talking to a dizzying range of organizations, employers across sectors, educators in the UK and beyond. And what I can say with absolute confidence is that when this starts, you will see good things happen. It's a classic learning path because you take people through a comfort zone, because you face them with why we call this a crisis, and we don't varnish that, and then we empower people. That's the crucial thing. We leave people, your students and colleagues, empowered, meaningfully empowered with something that they feel they've got a stake in because they've designed an action themselves. This is powerful stuff. We've got nearly 50,000 people that can attest to that. So please join us in any way you can. Have further conversations with us. We're also here to strengthen your arm in advocating for this in whatever way we can help. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Look forward to further conversations with you or your colleagues. And what can I say? Good luck. Thanks very much. And yeah, look forward to further conversations. Take care.